Hello and welcome to another episode of the Viral Culture Podcast. I am your host, Natoly, and today I am joined by Lucas Ashby. Did I say that right?
Ashby? Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
And yeah, we're going to talk about a couple different things today, from his TikTok fame. I think I consider it fame because I have like 2 followers. And to a lot of other racial kind of topics and conversations and things like that as well that look forward to getting into. But I'll let him start, kind of introduce yourself, let the people know who you are.
Yeah, my name is Lucas Ashby. I'm from Texas. And basically I have a multiracial background, and that's something I love to talk about. And I think especially as American society is becoming a lot more diversified, I love kind of bringing that topic up and talking about it. I think it's very relevant. But
yeah, like more and more, like today, I, as someone, okay, I'm African, I guess, but like, coming here, I'm learning about my own history as an African as well, but like also like American history as like a lot of things that I've been blind to, and purely based on things like education and just like how things were presented to me. But like specific to your case, I think like I was very surprised when my brother mentioned to me. He was like, Lucas is Black, right? I was like, wait, what? How? Like it's not something I can see, like, and like.
Oh no, I mean, yeah, and I think it's a funny thing about, because I don't know how race is looked at, and I know how it's looked at in some parts of the world, but I know it's a funny thing about when people say it is a social construct, because race is looked at differently across the world, and a lot of Americans don't realize that. I think that's always a funny topic to bring up around, especially around other Americans, because there's such a historical thing that it's even changed so much in American history, the idea of what constitutes race, that it's just a very, very funny topic whenever you ask people, just in any different society or any different generation, but yeah.
So like, do you want to touch a little bit on your background, just to like your parents, so people can kind of get an idea of like.
Yeah, of course. My mother, she's African American. And then my father, he is Irish American. So his family's from Ireland. And so I guess he would be a second generation American since they came over. But yeah, he's and that's kind of, I grew up in that kind of a family, and they were both not even from Texas. So they both came from the Midwest and moved down here. And that was very, very interesting. So yeah, I came from a big family, about 1 to 7 children. And but yeah, I mean, and so that was a very interesting thing, because I mean, there's a lot of social dynamics, because my mom, obviously, when you see how I turned out, my mom wasn't necessarily darker. She was kind of like, she was like medium to lighter skin African American. But again, I can go into this if you want me to in a little bit, but like this kind of constitutes what the historical topic of the 1 drop rule, if you've ever heard of that.
No, I don't know what that is.
Oh man, would you like me to kind of go a little more into that?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
So the 1 drop rule is a very interesting thing in American history. It's this thing, basically, I think it was shortly after the Civil War. A lot of people got a lot of racist white people got very scared at the idea that, okay, what if their kid married someone that happened to be African American? Because this is when the idea of eugenics is going on, eugenics, like Nazi things, like that. And basically, they started implementing these rules that if you even had 1 African American ancestor, like it could have been like your great great grandpa, you were automatically by the law considered African American, even if you had blonde hair, blue eyes, and and so that was a very, very interesting thing. And so there was even a literary, believe it or not, there's actually a literary archetype, or like a trope or a character in books that was based off of this very thing. It was called, and I'm using a very archaic word here, it was called the tragic mulatto. And so it was this book character, and it's the weirdest thing. You can look it up. It was after the Civil War, and then maybe to like about like 50s, where they're making books and movies about it. And it's this character, they're white, but they're trying to hide their 1 Black ancestor, and then it comes out, and then their whole life supposedly gets ruined. Like, it's very, very racist type of literature,
Yeah.
And so, anyways, so like my mom, she is African American, and I look back in the census records. Her parents are African American. Her grandparents are African American. Her great grandparents are African American. But then you look at her, and you're like, well, she obviously has European ancestry. Some, a decent amount. And so the thing is, though, is yeah, because people basically, even if they, were lighter skinned, they were still forced to choose black because it was like, well, no, you have that ancestor, so you have to pick that. And so it's a very, very interesting thing about American history. A lot of people don't know about, but you know, it's something people still ironically hold on to today, even in a certain sense. But yeah.
Yeah, no, it's something that it's funny you mentioned that. I was watching Last Week Tonight, that John Oliver thing,
Yeah.
and he was kind of talking about how it was about housing, on how there's like the discrimination of housing and things like that.
Yes, yes.
And that kind of got me to think like they were probably tracing that kind of thing too, like the one drop rule that because they were basically not allowing people who were not white to move into certain areas, and they
Yes.
weren't getting government funding and stuff like post-war and things like that.
Yes.
And I bet I was thinking in my mind, like they were probably, people were doing research and like making sure that people had the one drop, they weren't allowed to move into
Oh yeah.
those types of areas too.
And I know you've probably read about that too. And that's definitely like a thing that, that's the biggest way to build wealth, especially in the modern day, is owning property, and redlining. That's what you're talking about, right? Is
Yeah,
redlining.
exactly.
Yeah. And so like, and I mean, that's the crazy thing, a lot of people, it's always funny, you'll bring up to people about different things. Like, I know that sometimes it's a controversial topic, is the idea of reparations to
Mhm.
some people. And they act like, well, what are you talking about? Your grandparents weren't slaves. You weren't even slaves. But then they don't realize how recently a lot of these things were, even the idea
Mhm.
of, gosh, what? Like my mom was like 11 when the Civil Rights Act got passed. She was a kid in school
Mhm.
when that happened, And and that's a whole nother topic about how like that worked. But then yeah, and then just redlining still went on. And that's still an issue even today, is just things like that. And it's just funny, that's something that's not ever talked about.
Yeah, or it's you just don't, yeah, you don't hear about it because it's not something that's put in like public light, or it's not something
Yeah,
that's studied in history at all. I mean, you've studied here, but like I don't know if you guys looked at that in history, like that type of housing discrimination, or is this something you found out after the fact?
it was something I found out after the fact. Obviously, like there's some things that I'll bring up around certain people that that, well, what I never heard about that. And it's like, well, of course I hear about certain things a lot growing up from my mom, but like, yeah, that was something, redlining I didn't know about till, like I was an adult, because I was born in the 90s, and, so that's just something, but no, it's crazy, how, for lack of a better word, how systemic a lot of these things were.
Yeah.
Um, because growing up, especially in American school, they try and, give you, and obviously there's things that people are trying to do to make it better. Obviously, there's also backlash, but they try and make it seem like, well, MLK gave his "I Have a Dream" speech. Then the Civil Rights Act was passed a year later, and then other things happen, and everyone gets along now. And obviously things are much better, but no, there's still so many issues. Even the fact, even the idea. I know I'm going down a rabbit hole, but even the idea of getting MLK Day as a national holiday was insanely hard. Like,
Mhm.
like the Arizona, the state of Arizona actually lost the Super Bowl because the people voted against making it a holiday.
I had no idea
Yeah,
about that. That's absurd.
yeah, this actually happened. And so they were actually going to say, hey, what if they were going to try and move some holidays around? They were going to make MLK, because it had already been a federal holiday during the 80s. It had been made that, but they were trying to, I guess, I don't know if it was a state holiday or something in Arizona, but the voters didn't approve it. So they took the Super Bowl away from them. They're like, no, forget it. And then, of course, soon after that, they conveniently voted to make it a holiday there. But yeah,
That's insane, man. That
and that's like recent history.
Yeah, I'm like, that's less than a lifetime away. Like there's people alive, like you were saying, your mom was 11 when like civil rights was going on, and it's like
Yeah.
wasn't that long ago, and like people who believed the other side of that are still very much alive. So it's like we still need to work through this kind of, you know, fixing the situation and not acting like it didn't happen, but like actually acknowledging it and kind of working through those things. And like another example, like to kind of cite what you were saying is, I don't know if you're familiar with Bruce's Beach.
No, go ahead
Uh,
and educate me.
so there was this, it was like a family owned by area of a beach in, I can't remember what area. I think it's California, right? And then it was owned by the Bruce family.
Hmm.
And basically they created this. They were kind of wealthier, so they bought this area of land and just made it like an area where Black people could go to the beach, basically.
Yeah.
And what ended up happening was the government was like, hey, so we need this area for some, they finessed it, they legally finessed it basically to say like we need this area for us kind of thing, and for it to be open to the public kind of thing, basically to say like to get rid of the Black people on the beach kind of thing.
Oh no. And that's the frustrating thing, and I think a lot of people don't realize why people get so frustrated. And
Mhm.
they don't realize that time and time and time and time again, when they said to many African American people, "Hey, well, you can't, you can't go to our banks, you can't do this." So, and then when they did end up making great communities that started prospering, they got destroyed. That's even how
Mhm.
Central Park got started.
I literally learned that like last year, and I was like, what? Like, how is that even like
Yeah,
not? It's just not a thing. Like, no one tells us that, and I was just mind blown when I heard about that too.
and so it's one of those things that, and I think, a lot of people, and that's a comment I get when I'll bring up certain videos and trying to talk about it. There's a lot of people will be, and I'm sorry I'm using this accent, but it's just something I hear a lot. So, it's why are you trying to bring it the past? And it's like, well,
Mhm.
okay, well, if you don't understand why people are frustrated and why people are trying to make changes, you have to, if you want to understand why people feel this way, you need to look at the things that have repeatedly happened
Mhm.
throughout American history. I mean, and not even just American history, sadly. This is a lot of world history,
Yeah.
but this is just the stuff that I don't we know because we live here,
Mhm.
But yeah, it's interesting though. But yeah, I mean, but yeah, I mean, I grew up, yeah, in a biracial family though, and so it was kind of interesting kind of hearing the stories because my mom was the first in her family to go to college. Um,
That's awesome.
and she definitely dealt with a lot of backlash even from her own dad, who thought, she was just terrible because she should have been try to be a wife and try, get married and have kids and be stay at home,
Mhm.
um, because yeah, I mean, you got to think. I mean, this is like the late '60s. Her dad was born, gosh, in the 19 teens. So it's like he was already older, and so yeah, I mean, it's just. I mean, it was a really big deal for her, to kind of work her way up and get to where she did, and yeah, I mean, she joined the military, uh, made it to the rank of major in the army, and which is a really big deal. Served for 23 years, and ended up meeting my dad, and so my three half siblings, my older siblings, they're all like I guess fully black, however you would phrase that. Both their parents are black, and of course, me and the rest of my siblings are all mixed, in the I guess conventional sense, however you explain that. And so it's always kind of funny, kind of if I go anywhere with any of them, and people, it's like, yeah, that's my brother, and they're like, well, okay, yeah. But yeah, because one of my brothers is on TikTok. Well, two of my brothers are on TikTok, and so it's just kind of funny always having that conversation. Uh, but yeah, I mean, go ahead.
So like, what are the do you have any like experience, like what was that like, because you're saying you're about three, was it four of you guys that are like mixed in, if you had three half that are
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Four of us. Yeah, the younger four.
so are you the one, are you like, does everyone not look for lack of a better term, does everyone not look black? I don't know how to phrase that properly.
That's the best way you can phrase it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. The youngest of us. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean. So my youngest sister. I mean, yeah, I mean, yeah, pretty much. Yeah, we all kind of look like this. I mean, obviously, it doesn't help when you have an Irish dad who's literally the pastiest, whitest people on this planet are the Irish. The people. I mean, you turn on your microwave 30 seconds, they get a sunburn. The type of people. Irish people are the whitest people on this earth. But yeah, yeah. I mean, it was interesting growing up Irish. Well, so I actually, something I hear from a lot of biracial people is the identity of loneliness. This idea of never feeling like they fit in, and that's not even just the black and white thing. You'll see this, especially sadly. There's the NFL receiver Heinz Ward, who's half Korean, half black, and he talks about discrimination he dealt with about And so, I mean, and that's sadly, but I was very thankful because, think, I guess what's that, not serendipitously, fortunately enough, literally like all my cousins are mixed as well.
Mm.
Because on my mom's side, 3 of her 5 siblings married someone that wasn't Black, and my dad's 3 of their 4 married someone that happened to be Black, and so all my cousins either looked like me or looked similar, and so, and that was a very, very awesome experience because, you meet someone, and even if kids at school may not know what you're going through, trying to figure out your identity, your cousins do, and so you have that connection, uh, and that was really cool kinda getting to grow up like that, you know?
Yeah.
Uh but yeah, I mean, growing up, I mean, so I think initially my family, I feel like a lot of people when I don't know what your idea was whenever you first came to Texas. Was it, big 10-gallon hats and horses, or
King of the Hill accents.
like King of the Hill? Dang it, Dale. Yeah, and so like my mom, of course, she's from inner city Indianapolis, and she grew up. She had this, of course, romanticized idea of Texas, ranches, cowboys, and so of course, so they buy a ranch when shortly after her and my dad get married. They have cattle, and so we live like way out in the boondocks, and I don't think they thought about this much, sadly, whenever they were raising us, was that the community we're in, of course, at first growing up was like well over 90, 95% white.
Hmm.
And for lack of a better term, very, very red,
Yeah.
and so yeah, so it was in very, very rural. And so these are people that aren't around different people a lot. And these are people that have been here kind of isolated with their own ideas for generations. And so, yeah, that made for a very, very interesting early childhood growing up. I remember my sister, who's my half sister, growing up with, she would be called slurs. I remember she was called burnt toast and things, and amongst other things, among other kids. And I even remember, believe it or not, this is the weirdest thing because my mom, she would rail against like a lot of like Confederate things growing up and just how disgusting and racist they were. I remember we had like Confederate like reenactors come to our school as a kid, and I just remember being like, "What's going on, man?" Because I knew they were the bad guys, but everyone else is just kind of sitting there, just like staring at us, just like, oh, I'm like 7 or 8, and so, but yeah, so I mean, like the idea of race is always, it's kind of funny, So I've taught in schools before, and I taught in 2 different schools. I taught in a very rural, mainly white school, and I've also taught in a school that was mostly African American and Hispanic. The idea and the idea of race was never brought up really almost ever in this rural school, but the idea of race was brought up in this African American Hispanic school. And do you want to know why, though? I mean, can you guess why? Because it affects people's lives. It's always the funniest part.
Mm.
Whenever I'm talking to, some pompous guy like in England or something, they'll say, why do Americans always want to bring up race? Why are you so obsessed with race? It's like, well, when it affects your life, you're going to be thinking about race,
Yeah.
And so of course, as a kid, like that's my thing. I'm thinking, like, I think about race because I notice, okay, my parents don't look like every other parents around here, like I noticed, okay, well, his parents look like that, her parents. And so you notice, and so that already, you notice that very quickly as a kid. And I remember, going to baseball games, or when I be playing little league, and kid would see my mom come up and they're like, I didn't know your mom was Black, or I kind of really weird about it. Uh, and things kind of came to a head when I was about 9 or 10 years old. I don't know if you've heard this story, but my mom, she owned an assisted living, and she started getting harassed. She'd drive her truck down the road, she'd get run off the road, the dirt road leading to our ranch that we lived in, and people would start like kind of like taking our mail, doing things. We're like, okay, that may not seem like whatever. And then things came to a head when it's summer. I'm supposed to go out one day, and they don't let any of us go outside the house. And my dad's outside. I don't see him all morning. And then I come out later that day, and we start having to clean off the spray paint off of my dad's truck. So we're scrubbing it off. I don't think much of it. I'm kind of just whatever. Maybe I was just some idiot. And I guess my dad thought I was old enough to hear about it. So about, short time later, I'm driving with him in his truck, and I ask him what happened, what really happened, and he tells me that people spray painted the N word lover all over his truck,
Oh my gosh.
and they sprayed it all over his truck. And I think after that was when they realized, yeah, we need to get out of here. Um, and so that was definitely, I think, something that's impacted me to this day. I kind of grew up with a slight country accent, and I tried to change the way I spoke after that. I tried to. I didn't feel comfortable around people like that afterwards because of just what they did. And I hate to say it, yeah, stereotype. But and so of course we ended up moved to a much more diverse area east of Austin. Where I mean, no real ethnic group or racial group was more than maybe like 35-40% of the population. And so, yeah, that was, and so my mom operated her assisted living there, and it was a cool place, because all of a sudden, I was around other people that weren't just, and there was plenty of people that were multiracial and were mixed, and so it wasn't weird anymore. Then all of a sudden, I realized then, of course, well, no, now I'm even more of an anomaly because most mixed kids don't look like me, even. So, you know, uh, and so very quickly, I was like, I wasn't Barack Obama, and I looked like Rachel Dolezal, like the crazy lady that made up. And
Yeah.
so, and so, I remember, kind of bringing that up one time, and some kids didn't believe me. And I remember, like, as a kid, like that really hurt, because you go through all this crap in this old place where you're not accepted. Then you come here to other people that are mixed or whatever you think are going to accept you, and you're not. And so, I was only 10, and so, but after a while, I think I grew up in that community, and everybody knew my family, and it wasn't a big deal. And I think that was such a great experience growing up in a diverse area, growing up in a diverse area where not everybody's family was the same, and everybody, people look different. And that was great. Uh, but yeah, and then of course I go to college, which, some colleges are very diverse, some aren't.
Hmm.
And, of course I go into some areas where people came from the same towns like the one I came from as a kid, where they're mostly around white people. So then they bring up things, they say things, not realizing that I'm mixed or biracial. It's like, yeah, so I need to tell you something first. But yeah, I mean, and that was just a very, very interesting experience, just going through life. And even now, just on the internet, on TikTok, communicating with people, the idea of race, because everybody has a different experience. Everybody looks at the idea of race differently because, again, it's a social construct, depending on your age, depending on where you grew up. And so the idea of race is just, it's always an interesting topic. It's a volatile topic, but it's a very interesting topic. But yeah, I mean, I like, what do you feel like? I mean, like, what's it like, because you're in Columbia, Missouri, right?
Yeah.
Is it a very diverse area, or?
Fortunately, it is when schools in particular,
Yeah,
because it is a college town. So
yeah,
with Mizzou being right there, like, you will see
of
a lot of
course.
different people, different um, groups, and there's several like events and things that happen associated with the school and just like within the town that, like celebrate certain international areas of the
Yeah,
world, like
yeah,
um Asian festivals and things like that that happen, African festivals and all of that. But it is, when there are also those moments when I always thought it was more diverse than it was, because the experience I relate to, I guess, is you still get those, and this is something you can't really explain unless someone's experienced it, but you still get those looks, like,
yeah,
when you go to like a Walmart, or you go into like a certain place and you're like, I'm the only person of color here, people kind of give you a little bit of a weird
yeah,
vibe where you're like,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
We're like, what's this person? So you kind of feel that little bit of antsy feeling. And I never, because this is the only place I'd been, like really, like it had been like college, and then like I lived in Columbia, and I kind of made that a norm. But then
yeah,
when I went to Houston, like to visit, like come see you guys and all that, and see my brother, um, that's when I realized like there was just so many different people. I felt like
yes,
I was walking into a store and I was like,
yeah,
there's like more Hispanic people over there than there are like white people, or like there's some. It felt like more of a melting pot. And then I was like, that's when it finally clicked. I was like, wow, there's actually other places that are like this. So I think because I was in the bubble, I was kind of like in that zone of this is the norm, like what it's going to be everywhere, not realizing that there are little spots of where there's melting pots, and the level of like comfortability that I felt was like something that I noticed right away. I was like, man, this is cool. Like there's just different people. I feel like I'm not the only one. You don't stick out like a sore thumb kind of thing in a crowd.
Oh, definitely.
That's the things.
That's a big deal, I mean, I remember us going into restaurants, as a kid, I didn't know why. I didn't know why everyone, jerked their head over and start staring at us. But now, of course, as you get older, you realize, oh, okay, because of that,
Yeah.
Because what? I mean, the idea, I think, even of interracial marriage in the United States, I think still, believe it or not, still, I think like what it was like one in every seven people, 6 or 7 people is still against interracial marriage in the United States, which is crazy, which ironically, like you put it the other way, I think about almost 1 in every 6 new marriages is an interracial marriage, though. So in the United States, but yeah, I mean, it's the funny thing, I think it definitely goes also with like an urban rural divide, in urban areas where it's more diverse, and it's gradually happening in suburban areas where people are used to other people, and they're used to different, not just like, but lifestyles, but also just different couples and different experiences. Like that's whatever, but yeah, you go out to a rural area. And that's the thing. I wish, looking back, if that's any advice I could give, was like, yeah, I mean, I don't think it was necessarily bad that my parents went to where they went, but I think about where you're going specifically before you go there, or before you live somewhere, I'm not saying every rural area is bad. I think there's some great rural areas in this country where they went specifically, I mean, looking back, I mean, obviously you didn't have Google back then, but like looking back, it's like, come on, man, like it's not an area you really want to raise your kids in, I
But
mean,
that's the thing though, right? That's the you have to think that way. It's a program thing. You think as a person of color in any kind of way, like,
yes.
Which is unfortunate because you have to like consider those things like, is it good for me to go there? Is it good for me to go here? Like, you have to have those conversations like mentally with yourself because it's for your own safety.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, totally. I remember, it's funny. Sadly my mom's passed away, but it's always funny kind of hearing some of her stories, because have you ever heard of a sundown town? Have you heard of that?
So I only learned about that last year because of the show Lovecraft Country. I don't know if you've seen that on HBO. Yeah. And they did that. And then when I saw that happening, I was like, there's no way that was a thing. I Googled and I was like, what is going on?
It wasn't even that long ago, too. Like, that's the crazy thing. I think like before I was born, or it may have been after. I remember my mom saying, though, it was like, I like the 80s, though. It was either the 80s or maybe early 90s.
Can you explain it just for people like who don't know?
Yes. So sundown towns, if you don't know, it's basically these towns where it was essentially an all-white town. I mean, it was, or even some places, sadly, still, I think, an all-white town that basically sundown meaning don't let the sun go down on you. And they'd say the slur after that. Basically, you do not want to be here after the sun sets because you're not going to have a happy ending, basically,
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, basically, I mean, that's the best way I can say it, the most PG way, but yeah, I mean, it's friggin' scary. And I mean, I've even heard of some places that people still say no, like certain parts of Alabama and, Mississippi, which sadly, I mean, those two places are still have a lot of issues with not official segregation, but segregation in a way. But yeah, I mean, I remember she went to a town, and my mom, I get this from her, I guess, very oblivious sometimes she would be. And so, and she was driving, she was out in East Texas, and she stops off in this cafe because, she didn't have Google, you didn't have Google Maps back in the day.
Yeah.
MapQuest, whatever people did. And so she stops off to try and find directions, figure out where she's supposed to be. Everyone looks at her. Again, she's oblivious, so she's just kind of like, maybe I stink or something. And so she goes up to the cafe woman and asks her real quick, and the woman kind of just like awkwardly tells her what she needs to do to get to where she's going. And so mom's kind of like, okay, that's kind of weird, and everyone's still staring at her. She leaves, gets in her car, goes, and then she sees a billboard on her way out of town that was saying, "Don't let the sun go down on you," N-word, basically. And so it was just kind of like, she was just like, what just happened, And because she grew up again in Indianapolis, where I mean, there's still issues, but it's not like it wasn't rural.
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean, yeah, I mean, that was it's just interesting, hearing those stories, especially from her perspective about that growing up, uh
Were you so you kind of touched on like a lot of the I guess disadvantages with you being biracial and like looking white. Are there any like advantages of
oh,
that? Like if people aren't aware, what are the advantages?
I'm literally the embodiment of white privilege right here. Yeah, a definite benefit right there, obviously, because of the way I look. I'm not set. I don't get. I've had it happen to my siblings. I don't get followed when I go into a corner store sometimes, or have these things happen. So yeah, I mean, definite benefit. I mean, I will say, big benefit though has been also just kind of getting to see kind of, I guess, just getting to kind of see things in different perspectives, if that makes sense. Basically, going into a room, which, or going to a place that may be like, it's mostly white people, and very, and a different crowd that's not maybe used to people of color, and just kind of like hearing what they talk about, hearing what they, and it was a lot of things. I think growing up, I would think, I was like, well, I look like these people, but then they would talk about the things they were into, the things that they would do for fun. I was like, well, that's stupid. I was like, I'm white, so why do I, listen to this music? Why don't I do these things? And I realized, well, it was like, well, I didn't grow up in that type of family. I grew up in a different family, in the sense, like, there may be some things I share in common with them, but there's some things I'm going to share in common with my African American ancestry, because I grew up in a different family.
Mhm.
Just, and so, but yeah, I mean, I think benefits though. I mean, yeah, I mean, my my family, my father always made a point whenever we were watching TV, if there was an actor or actress, he would almost do like the rapper the Logic thing. He always mentions he's biracial. Uh, anytime we were watching TV or something, to make me feel less alone, my dad would always mention, "Oh, hey, he's biracial. She's biracial. He watching SNL. He's like, oh, Maya Rudolph. She's biracial."
Mhm.
And he would mention that, and so it would always get this in my, and I think that was a great thing that my dad did, because it helped me realize, okay, there's other people like that. And I think that was kind of a cool thing, just even like, even reading, about Barack Obama's life, which, that I know that's like a little bit different, because I know his father was from Kenya, but still, I mean, he had that experience of just kind of like learning about different parts of his family, and I think it's interesting kind of seeing both sides of that. But yeah, I mean, like growing up, like, I think I mentioned this before in a video, uh, just talking about, like, we would always kind of make fun of we would joke about, like, with my brothers and I, about how my mom's voice would change. Her tone of voice, the way she talked would completely change. She'd put on that news anchor voice whenever she'd go out in public, or whenever we'd go to the store. But whenever we were at home, she'd talk completely different. And people may say, "Oh, well, no, like everybody does that, But no, I mean, I can go to a grocery store, and some guy named Dale's going to still talk to me like this. But no, like, my mom's voice would immediately change to like, "Hi, how are you?" Like this almost like news anchor like voice. I didn't know it, like, what code switching was. Like, she would literally have to change the way she talked, the words. I mean, yeah, people may say the verbiage may talk to me. Yeah, I'm not gonna say, like, I'm not going to talk in slang when I'm in a job interview, but like literally, like her complete voice would change to like something of a different person. And so that was something, I mean, growing up, like, a benefit was, like, I would see some of these things, of what my mom would have to do. My dad didn't have to change his voice going out in public, or the way he talked, you know. But yeah, I mean, that was definitely a benefit. Uh, but yeah, I mean, disadvantage though, yeah, I mean, I think I looked like, I mean, yeah, I mean, I think that's, like I've said, like, it's just dealing with this isolation, just, you're realizing, like, well, I guess I'm the other, I'm different. Because that's the funny part, people will say this on TikTok, which, again, they don't know, so I'm not going to be mad at them. Or people may look at me now and say, well, you're white, like, you look white, so you're white. Okay,
It's like
I'm not
denying
gonna,
your experience kind of thing.
and I think that's what it is at the end of the day. is that, and here's the thing, I'm not this guy that's sitting here holding on to the one drop rule, this crazy racist thing. But what I am saying is my experience in life, based off the things I've just said, have not like I don't feel comfortable saying that. And that was always the thing. My mom's too. I also have to look back at that. Was that in the past when people that did look like me had a black mom or a black dad, they would do what's called passing. And would you like me to kind of explain that a little more, just for
Yeah.
some of the people that listen? So passing was this thing, and I've talked a little bit about that with the book, kind of Tragic Mulatto Archetype, but especially it happened a lot like after World War II in the early 1900s. And basically, what people would do is like if they were of mixed ancestry and they kind of came out looking quote unquote white, they would pass, because even though they officially would have to say they're black, they would go ahead and they would completely like cut all ties with their family or any siblings or relatives that would know of their background, so they could try and succeed in society. And so they would like, yeah, they would just completely cut all that off and just go into the identity and just say, yeah, I'm white. And so and there's many notable cases of that. There's one that's been talked about a lot, this guy named Anatole, who came from both his parents were uh African American, Creole, and he like left and they moved from New York to New Orleans to New York, and he basically like completely cut all ties with that side of his family, became a writer, and just lived his whole life as a white man. And so I guess that's what it goes back to. I think my mom, and that's the thing. It's also that too, is that my mom, I think, was always afraid. I think after that incident where my father's truck was spray painted and she was harassed, was that we would ignore and eschew our black side. And
Mm.
so more than anything, it's not necessarily to get some stupid clout or to do anything. It's more than anything to honor my mom, and to say that I'm biracial. Obviously, I don't have the experience of a black man in America, and so I don't think that's fair to sit here and say I'm a black man. I'm not Rachel Dolezal. I'm not going to sit here and say, but I do feel more comfortable saying I'm biracial. I mean, if you want to say, yeah, sure, you look like, that's fine. I mean, yeah, I'm not going to lie to myself, but I do also feel like I need to honor that, and so that's why I say yes, I'm biracial. You can say I'm other, whatever. Um, and I think that's going to be an interesting conversation as America itself gets more and more diverse. You know, the idea of race in general. Like, I mean, what do we say now? And I think that's just going to be a very, very interesting topic going forward. You know, uh, because yeah, I mean, the idea of, what the average African American technically is, quote unquote, what somebody would say is mixed. So the average African American, I think, has about 20-21% European ancestry.
Okay.
Obviously, sadly, that's not through choice. It was sadly through slavery when much assaults happened. Uh, but but that again, that kind of goes back to kind of the one drop rules. Well, it's like, no, you can't say you're mixed. Like, no, you're black. And so, like, the idea of what people are actively now saying that they're multiracial, that's still a very, I wouldn't say new, but it's a fairly recent thing in American society that people are actively saying, like, no, I'm biracial, I'm mixed. Like, that's not like, yeah, sure, people have been mixed throughout history, but like people actively saying that's their identity is not that old of a thing.
Yeah.
Like, you know this. I mean, I know, like, definitely like in some Southern African countries, and sadly that was through like caste systems, but like there's actual like people like actually identify, like, especially I know in South Africa people identify as mixed. Obviously they use another word for it there. Uh,
Hmm.
but Tino told me about that story. But yeah, I mean, I know even in Brazil, there's the Pardo Brazilians, which that's people that are or multiracial in Brazil. And so, uh, and obviously, like, that's not always like, I'm not saying that they should do that here in the sense, because obviously in South Africa, like, it was based off a very racist system, is how that came about. But what I am saying is that the idea of that is very, very new in America. I think people are still very much getting used to that.
So I kind of wanted to lean into your the TikTok side of
Oh yeah.
your famous blog here. Um, I think, what's your name? Is it pasee blanc? Like, is that white pass? I think it just came to me.
Yeah.
White passing, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So that's like a phrase like I would hear repeatedly, because a lot of people that follow my page, of course, happen to be biracial, multiracial, and a
Mhm.
lot of them coincidentally are people that are from New Orleans or the New Orleans area, which a lot of people around that area are Creole, and Creole people are, by nature, I mean, they're mixed, and so the phrase they would use, yeah, is pasee blanc, which was somebody that like would like look like me,
Mhm.
and either they would look like me, or they would literally just like pass into white society. Uh, so it's a very, very interesting thing. But yeah, uh, the way I created that TikTok was very interesting. So it's funny that you kind of brought up my upbringing
Mhm.
and stuff, and that's actually how I got started on TikTok. Was thought about I randomly thought about all the times I'd be in the company of people, and they would say something either obscenely racist or incredibly ignorant, to where it was just like, I like, you have to educate them, and just like the thoughts that would run through my head. So I remember I made a video kind of just like highlighting. I was like, hey, like, well, number one, like, I'm mixed or I'm biracial, and let me explain to you why what you're saying is either wrong or why you need to shut up. Uh, you know, because sometimes obviously people just don't care. That's the thing I've said this before. I mean, that's sometimes people are just ignorant, and so I mean, yeah, you got to educate them, but also sometimes people are just bigots, and bigots by nature are dumb, and so I mean, they're not gonna. I know somebody may ask you, why are you hanging around people like that? Bigots by nature are dumb. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen. There's a funny Bill Burr skit where he kind of talks about. You've heard of the comedian Bill Burr?
Yeah, yeah, no, I know
Yeah.
Bill Burr. I
He
love
has a funny skit. I don't know if you've heard where he's like, how do you know when like a racial slur is coming from someone? And like one guy, like that's the thing I've always noticed about bigots is what they'll do is like he's joking about how like a guy's like watching T.O. or Terrell Owens, like a football player or whatever. He's like getting unusually angry about this athlete. And then what those guys always do, here's the thing, they always do this whenever they're talking, is they'll start putting feelers out there. Yeah, yeah, yeah. He's such an idiot, And they'll start like gradually like putting feelers, like seeing if you agree with them, and gradually start trying to like wind their way into politics or racial things. And that's literally what happens every time. Like I like it's like a playbook that they follow. Bigots, I swear. Like they will always like put out feelers and see if you agree with them. And I mean, as you know, when I was younger, obviously I didn't know what was happening, but it happens to you enough that you know exactly what road they're going down. Um, but so that's what made me make that TikTok, was wanting to really kind of talk about that. And I didn't realize how many other people had
it.
similar experiences. But yeah,
What are you up to? Like 50,000? Almost
yeah,
50,000?
yeah, about 50,000 followers, and I think that's the biggest thing I've wanted to learn about since I started it, was if I just sit here and just make a video saying I'm mixed, I'm mixed, I'm mixed, what does that do? That doesn't do anything.
Mm.
I mean, sure, I can tell someone I'm mixed, like you've heard that I'm mixed, like one video. Like I don't care to go through that topic again. But what I like to talk about on this TikTok is I like to talk about the experiences of mixed people throughout American history, present day. So like I love to talk about people that may have been biracial and like what their experiences were like in this world, biracial people today and what they're doing. And also, I love talking about interracial relationships, because again, that's a much more common thing. And that's also, and so I love talking about experiences of interracial relationships, not just in America, though, because I think a lot of people, for some reason, think that racism is this uniquely American thing like McDonald's,
Mhm.
but it's not. It's not. Racism is an issue, sadly, in many, many parts of the world, and I mean, gosh, I mean, I can go into so many topics. I mean, but and that's the thing. So I love just getting to talk about that and talk about different groups of people that are multiracial,
Yeah.
But yeah,
So like from my experience with TikTok, I mean, a lot of people will probably kind of be deterred from it because of, that's what the kids doing. You just, what really kind of sticks out as popular is like the dances and things like that.
yeah,
But from what I've seen, um, personally, and like, because I'm in a program for education right now, is the
Mhm. Yeah.
the level of like education and community that's being found in something like TikTok is probably going to have more of an impact than people are um, anticipating. Because like you think of discussions on topics, and I know it's been something that's being talked about forever, like critical race theory and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's I think that because of the way like curriculum has been structured to tell history and like educate people in a specific way that leads to ignorance typically, or
Yeah.
just not knowing things, the fact that certain people have platforms now to be able to actually tell you what's happening or educate
Yeah.
you on like the biracial experience to where people don't feel
Yeah.
alone and things like that. I think that can really make a difference in the future. And I think for you, you've found people who've had, you're saying shared experiences and things like that. Like that level of community where someone can like open their phone and like watch a couple of videos and like, that's funny, I've had the same experience. And then,
Yeah.
that feeling as well.
And I think it's the hard part. I think so many people trash the bad side of social media, which I completely understand. The idea of, I mean, there's some genuinely scary people on TikTok and Twitter that are saying some things that like I'm genuinely afraid of. And the fact that they'll have like a following, I'm like, that's genuinely scary.
Yeah.
But like you said, I think there's also that side of people that, and I think people always will criticize this generation, for the issue of lack of attention span. But I think what's so good about this is that you're able to convey an idea or your own personal experience or the experience of somebody else in either 15 seconds or a minute. And I think and you can do that in just enough time that gradually that can help open someone's mind up. And maybe they like that video. So they're going to see another video that's similar to that, or maybe they comment on it. And I think that's a big deal. That's a very big deal. And, but yeah, that's what I have liked about it. I agree.
Yeah. I think like the fact that people are starting to have these conversations, I think is a win in itself, because you used to be able to stay in your bubble, but now it's like, it's kind of just out there in conversation.
Mhm.
And I think that's like kind of the problem where we're getting stuck now, where, um, I'll bring up a topic of something like a Fox News, right?
Yeah.
Like certain people view the world or politics in a certain way because they only watch Fox News. So that's like
Yeah.
their perspective of the world.
Mhm.
But when you like kind of step back and like look at everything that's going on, you may like see like something that's being said is ridiculous. And this is true like on both sides. I'm just
Yeah.
using
Oh,
like Fox
totally.
News as the example,
Totally. Totally.
but like it's allowing people to maybe see things that they weren't aware of, or have conversations that they um, wouldn't necessarily have had was a platform like this not available. Because even social media, things like that, you can tailor it a bit too much to like what you want. Like Facebook, you'll only see like kind of things that agree with you. Twitter, you can follow people you want to and things like that. But I feel like TikTok is kind of unique in a way to where you get that odd video where you're like, wow, I didn't know that. So I think that's
No,
an
I think it's a
opportunity.
great thing, Yeah, I think, and that's the biggest thing and it's just short enough that someone's not going to quickly just like change it. Because if you could hold someone's attention for a minute, just a minute, you
Mhm.
can get out your idea out there, And I think that's the biggest thing, And yeah, I agree with you. I think that's the biggest issue with a lot of Facebook, and that's and that's still kind of a frustration with TikTok but like Facebook, I mean, gosh, like that's been like the ruiner of friendships for God knows how long because I mean, people will share their ideas and say some things that they would normally say in person because they're so used to being around people like them. And I think, and then of course, it's just their friends replying back to them. And I think when you're on something like TikTok, for better or for worse, not always good, sometimes they'll get those ideas out there. And maybe, I mean, yeah, there's going to be some crazy, but sometimes maybe people will say something back to them and they realize really quick, like, I've always thought of something this way. Maybe what I thought of that way hasn't been correct. I agree.
And I think that is something that like may not seem like a benefit right away, but I think as people progressively go, um, that could actually turn around like at a younger age, because obviously probably the demographics of TikTok are probably like way younger, like
Yeah.
high school and lower than that are the ones that are probably the majority of people on there. But kind of similar to what you were saying earlier of like when I would go to college, some people would be like, there were literally like no people of color like in our school. Like
Yeah.
it would be like, you're the first Black person I've ever had a conversation with, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But so you can see why they wouldn't know certain things or be able to relate to an experience or understand certain things. But if they're seeing something like on a platform like that at like 13, and then maybe understanding it a little bit better by the time they get to college, it'll become more of like a seamless transition, and you're more
Yeah.
aware of it. That would be the hope, of course.
I mean, and that's a big deal, I mean, like, yeah, I mean, I could go on and on about the things that frustrate me about it and things that are very toxic about it, but there's some really great things, and I think, yeah, you I mean, hit the nail on the head with that, though. Uh, and I hope that this can kind of be like a good kind of way to, yeah, convey or just communicate an experience, because I think that's the biggest thing more than anything. If I just sit here and rail off like a list of facts, George Washington was born in 1732, and George Washington fought in this war, and then George Washington is like, that doesn't do anything. But if I'm going through an experience, that's something people can connect to. And I think that's the biggest thing, I've liked about it.
Yeah. So the other question I was going to ask, I guess, was like if you had any like tips for people who are trying to grow their following, and kind of blow that
Ooh,
up. I
I
guess
think
that shared experiences is something. A tip.
that's the biggest thing. I mean, and there's a famous C.S. Lewis quote. I've said this before, and the beginning of friendship always starts with, "You too? I thought I was the only one." Basically saying this: if you can share your experience, a lot of people think that their experience from life, a certain thing of life, is unique and they're the only one, but a lot of times experiences in life are a lot more universal than we realize, and I'm not sitting here, uh saying like, oh, you should say something terrible, but what I am saying is, I think, like, I gave my own personal experience, I gave my own personal experience of how racism has affected me uh in life, and I think that's something, I mean, people may say, "Oh, well, no, I'm just this boring kid that is from Hannibal, Missouri, or whatever, and I don't have anything interesting." But there's something either unique in your experience, or that or that you're interested in, that other people either may be interested in, or that maybe they don't know yet that they're interested in. I think that's the biggest thing, is that niche, that niche of that experience,
Mhm.
like I mean, it doesn't even have to be about. I mean, it can be about anything, but there's always that niche that other people can connect to, And I think, but yeah, I think personal experience is huge, and that's why I love talking about it. I think other people, if I could say that, I would definitely recommend that, because I think that helps. I think, yeah, I mean, I think that can definitely help grow your page, but also, I mean, I think that helps other people out a lot. You can talk to other people and you can communicate with them, but also I've learned a lot of stuff. I've learned a lot of stuff about how I need to communicate and how I need to talk.
Mhm.
Obviously, it probably hasn't been perfect on here, but I mean, I definitely feel like I've gotten better with that. So yeah, I mean, I think anybody that's starting out doing something like that, yeah, I mean, go through your personal experiences of life, and whether you believe it or not, your experiences are going to be a lot more universal than you realize. Maybe not necessarily universal, but there's going to be a lot of other people that realize that. And then I think when they see that, oh man, like, there's somebody else like me, that's a self-esteem boost, man. That's a self-esteem boost. That's huge.
Yeah, I think particularly like through something like a pandemic, I think is when people were so isolated,
Yeah.
being able to find that like area of community, or like that little bit of like humor, something to entertain you, just something to pass the time, stop you from going crazy, like stir crazy from just like sitting around. I think that is something that a lot of people can relate to and kind of tell. Like if someone's being transparent, you can kind of see it as well. Like this is
It,
a genuine experience as well, so you can kind of feel that. And I think that a lot of people will follow you based on that as well. Just give people like a quick plug of your name again. It was Passe Blanc, right?
yeah, Passe Blanc, PASSEBLANC, Passe Blanc on TikTok. But yeah, I mean, I love to just kind of talk about maybe my own personal experiences, but also the experiences of others. And I mean, I think that's awesome.
Yeah, and I follow your page, and there's some good stuff on there. So I would recommend that people do check that out too. But we're gonna wrap up here and kind of close out. Thanks, Lucas, for joining me here. I didn't mention that I met you through my brother, in case people
Yeah,
are wondering like how we know each other. but yeah, we mentioned my brother who's
Man
a
who
mutual
hates
friend.
sweet tea.
Yeah, sweet. I remember that one, sweet tea. Yeah, yeah. No, he's all right. He's pretty good.
He's all right. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, no, thanks for sharing your experiences. That's kind of you shared a lot of stuff with us that was like really personal. But I really hope that a lot of people can hear that and maybe either learn something or relate to it and kind of find like a little bit of community or peace within their day, that they're not the only one going through this type of thing.
No.
More like housekeeping on my end as far as podcast goes. If you know anyone else who you think would be great for the podcast, be sure to to either message me on Instagram, just DM me on at Viral Culture Podcast, and I'll be more than happy to have that conversation and maybe get them on the page as well. But again, I just want to say thank you to Lucas for sharing your story, and we'll see you guys next time.